بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا سبحانه وتعالى ويرضى. واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له، واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله، بلغ الرساله وادى الامانه ونصح الامه وجاهد في الله تعالى حق الجهاد حتى اتاه اليقين، وصلى الله عليه وعلى اله واصحابه وازواجه وذرياته واهل بيته واتباعه الى يوم الدين. اما بعد، السلام عليكم ورحمه الله تعالى وبركاته. Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala has collected the well-known narration of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the commander of the faithful, Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan radiallahu ta'ala anhu, which the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, أطول الناس يوم القيامة أعناقا المؤذنون، أو إن أطول الناس أعناقا يوم القيامة المؤذنون. The people, the Muslims, the servants, the slaves of Allah, who will be, or shall have the longest necks, the necks which are the longest on the day of judgment are the mu'adhins. The people who will have the longest necks on the day of judgment are the mu'adhins. The ulama of Islam, they agree upon something with regards to this hadith, and they differ on something with regards to this hadith. Once more, third time. أطول الناس عناقا يوم القيامة المؤذنون. The people who have the longest necks on the day of judgment are the mu'adhins. The ulama, they agree upon something with regards to this hadith, and they differ on something with regards to this hadith. As far as that which they agree upon, they unanimously say that this hadith shows, proves, states, and cites the virtue of making the adhan, the excellence, the greatness, and the merit of being a mu'adhin. They agree upon that unanimously. That this hadith is proving, it is showing us, and it is establishing the virtue of making the adhan. As far as that which they differ on with regards to this hadith is what exactly is meant by أطول الناس أعناقا, longest necks, quote unquote. What's meant by that statement, longest necks? What does that mean? The first fork in the road, point of difference among the people of knowledge of the past, we're speaking, when I'm talking about current day ulama, I'm talking about of the past. They differ on, is the hadith literal or is the hadith figurative? Is it literal or is it quote unquote figurative? Is أطول الناس أعناقا, longest necks, على ظاهره, or is this يعني مما يجوز في اللغة? Is it literal, meaning they will have longer necks than the other Muslims and the other non-Muslims who stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day? Or does it mean they will have something of nobility, of honor, of beauty, etc.? Meaning that it's not actually literal longer necks. They differ over this. So some of them say, as we've already explained and established, they agree unanimously that this is madh lil mu'adhineen. This is praising the mu'adhins, clear. What's meant by those words? Atwalu, longest, stretched out necks. Does it mean that they will have abnormally long necks on that day? Or does it mean that they will have a virtue and a status and a means of beauty, etc.? So some of the ulama of Islam, they say the Messenger of Allah alayhi this authentic hadith means what he said. And he said what he meant, is that the necks will be longer. And that's nothing which is impossible to Allah. That's nothing which is difficult for Allah to do. Kayfa wala, how could that not be the case? And the Messenger of Allah alayhi says, وَتَدْنُ مِنْهُمُ الشَّمْسِ. He says that the sun will come near them and close to them. So what do scientists and people of space exploration and people who discuss the stars and the galaxies and so on, what do they say about the sun today? How far the sun is from the earth, how large the sun is, how hot the sun is. What happens if you stood on earth in front of the sun for a very long time? What will happen to you? Obviously, depending on how tall you are, how thin you are, depending on how much melanin you have in your skin, depending on the pigmentation, depending on the type of skin that you have, how old you are, how young you are, be different results. Some of us would stand out in the sun and we would faint and pass out. Some of us will stand in the sun and our skin will become red and burn. Some of us will stand in the sun and we get a great migraine and headache. Some of us will stand in the sun, what happened? But it's generally agreed standing in the sun directly for a very long time is going to do some type of damage or harm to a human being. And they say that the sun is extremely far from the earth, etc. What happens when you look directly into the sun? What happens? You may go blind. You may damage your eyesight. And the sun is supposed to be what? How far? And you may not even be that close to the equator. You may not be in a country or a climate which is extremely close to the sun. And it still hurts your eyes when you look at the sun. So the concept of the sun being close to human beings is something that we can't even begin to understand living on earth. But the Prophet tells us, وَتَدْنُ مِنْهُمُ الشَّمْسِ. The sun will come close to them. How will they stand so close to the sun without melting and evaporating? How is that even possible? But the Prophet, he said it. So for the mu'adhins to have the longest necks on that day, it's not impossible. And it isn't something which is beyond what Allah Azza wa Jalla has the ability and the omnipotence to do. And we believe that the unseen does not fall under the legislation. It does not fall under the jurisdiction of the seen. The ghaib isn't khadi' li alam shahada. The unseen is not under the jurisdiction of the seen. Things which are possible in our world, which we see, and they would be impossible in the unseen world, that's not the case. Rather, it is the exact opposite. The unseen in general is totally different than that which we see. And we, as Muslims, believe in the ghaib. That's qaida number one. Qaida number two. Rule number two is the hereafter. The ghaib of the hereafter is even what? More possible. And even more supernatural and paranormal. So it isn't something which is impossible or difficult to understand and to grasp. And the other ulama, they say, what's meant with this hadith is the Arabs of Jahiliyyah, the Arabs before Islam, they looked at a person's neck and they would determine certain things by a person's neck, such as beauty. If a woman that was thin and she had a long neck, she was considered to be a more beautiful woman than a woman who was shorter and she had a shorter neck. Even to this day, that's not something which is that impossible. And the concept of fashion and the concept of the industry of beauty and cosmetics. Short women are not considered to be beautiful. Women that have this amount of weight, too much weight, they're not considered to be picture perfect. But she's supposed to be tall and she's supposed to be thin. And there's a reason why. The shoes that she wears, her flank, the side of her body, the hips to her armpits. How long is that space? If she's very short, it's going to be a small space. But if she's longer, her body is stretched out. Fingertips, her legs, etc. Fashion. They have a standard of beauty. A standard of what? Of beauty. And they look at the length of certain things in a woman's body with regards to beautiful or not. What could that allow? And same with regards to those ancient pagan Arabs. They looked at someone with a long neck as considered to be a beautiful person. A second interpretation of those ulama who say that it's not literal is that what's meant by a long neck, yani, this person is nabil, this person is noble, and they are prestigious. فَهُوَ كِنَايَةٌ عَنِ الشَّرَفِ وَالنَّبْلِ. It's a indirect expression for nobility. I say, you have a very long neck. Just like when someone who's strong and powerful, we say he has a what? A strong arm, a long arm. His influence is far-reaching. And his arm isn't any longer than the next man's arm. Rather, this person who's influential, this person who is considered to be rough and tough and dangerous, he may be a short man. And he may have a very short reach. But we say, don't mess with Fulan, even if you're in another country or another city, because what? It's a very long reach. Huh? What? A black hand is never seen, but what? It's always what? It's always felt. So people, they speak figuratively as well. So they say that it doesn't mean that the person's neck will be this long, but it's a means of nobility and a means of jamal. Ila akhirih. This hadith, that's what it means, as I just explained to you. Why am I mentioning this hadith to you? Where am I trying to go? Before I even go that far, this hadith was used by many ulama about Islam to show that the best deed to do and the best position and status to have in the Islamic administrative world is to be a mu'adhin. And being a mu'adhin is better than being an imam. If you had the choice between mu'adhin or imam, they say that it's more virtuous in being a mu'adhin. It's greater virtue, higher superiority to call the adhan and not to be the speaker and the leader, etc. Are we understanding this? And the proof for that is this hadith. أطول الناس عناقا يوم القيامة المؤذنون. The people with the longest necks on the day of judgment are the mu'adhins. And the other ulama, they say, nay, kalla, no, being an imam is better. Being an imam is more virtuous. Being an imam has a higher status in Islam. And they use many proofs and many evidences. From the proofs and evidences that they use is the fact that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was a what? An imam, and he wasn't a mu'adhin. And if it was better for him to be mu'adhin, Allah would have allowed him and chose for him al-adhan and not imam. So the Prophet was the imam. So that's proof number one that being an imam is what? Is better. Let alone the verses in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, that وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ, Allah says in the servants of Ar-Rahman, meaning the chosen servants of Ar-Rahman, are those who do this, and those who do that, and those, and those, and those. And they also say, وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ, and they say what? وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Oh Allah, make us imams for the muttaqeen. Make us leaders and role models for the future generations of the muttaqeen. Ala ahd tafsirain, based off of one of the interpretations of that verse from Surah Furqan. There's another interpretation of that verse, but as the mashhur, the famous interpretation. And also when Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً, and we made from among those people imams, يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا, guiding the people, leading the people, لَمَّا صَبَرُوا, because they were patient, وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ, and they had certainty in our ayats. And there are many other verses that they use to prove their argument that being an imam is better than being a mu'adhin. And some of the ulama of Islam, they say the best thing to do is to make the adhan and be the imam. As it's been narrated from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he was quoted to have said, if I had the ability to do both, I would have done both. If I had the ability to be the Khalifa of the Muslims and the Mu'adhin of the Muslims, I would have done both. Tayyib. So that is the discussion in the issue of Mu'adhin versus Imam versus what? Mu'adhin. Which is best? And those are the proofs that they use. So when it comes to the month of Ramadan, preparation therefore, maximizing thereof, etc., of the dogmatic names and titles that we keep going over about Ramadan over and over and over again. We talk about Ramadan, preparing for it, maximizing it, benefiting from it, etc., etc., etc. I think, and Allah knows best, as a speaker, maybe I may be wrong, whereas I'm inside of the bubble and not outside of the bubble, but I also listen to other people's speeches as well. I'm a YouTuber myself. I watch lectures, and I benefit from lectures, English and Arabic. Most speakers, they only talk about Ramadan from one narrow point of view. One point of view and one point of view only. When they talk about preparing, when they talk about maximizing, when they talk about benefiting, when they talk about the virtues and the blessings of Ramadan, most people 9 out of 10 in Arabic and English, they only talk about it from the view and from the aspect of the 9 to 5 Muslim, the layman Muslim. They don't talk about it from the view of the what? Imam, the leader. What is his job with regards to preparing for Ramadan? What is his duty with regards to getting ready for Ramadan? What is the goal of the Imam, of the leader, of the Sheikh, with regards to maximizing his benefit and the benefit of what? Others with regards to the month of Ramadan. Can we agree on this? Can we agree on this or not? Most Ramadan talks are only for who? It's only addressed to who? Oh, guys, answer. I'm talking to you. Most Ramadan talks are for who? No question about that. Fear Allah, give sadaqah, avoid sin, come to the masjid, so on and so forth, right? And oftentimes the talk or the speech and the ilm is toned down and watered down and shaved down and simplified for the what? Common folk. And of course that's a benefit, because the majority of the people in the class or in the lectures are going to be common folk, but not everyone. There are tulabul ilm. However, what would happen, Noor, if we spoke about Ramadan and preparing for it and maximizing from the other aspect, from the driver's seat? What's the imam supposed to do with regards to preparing for Ramadan? And how does that benefit the layman? How does that benefit the what? The layman. That's because the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. The imam has only been placed to be what? Followed. It's the only reason why there's an imam, is to be followed. And we know that many of the Salaf Salih, they would say, Sinfani min al-nasi ila salahu salah al-nas. Two types of people. If they're upright, if they're straight, then the rest of the people will be upright and straight. Al-umara'u wal-ulama. The leaders and the scholars. The leaders and the scholars, if they were doing the right thing, and if they were upright, then the people would what? They will be upright. And that's because change begins and starts from where? Above and not from the bottom. And many people, they misunderstand this. And oftentimes they have a perverted understanding of this, and they twist it and they distort it. And they blame everything on the general people. The reason why the scholars are evil, the reason why the leaders are evil, the reason why this country is corrupt, the reason is because of what? The people. So don't try to make any change or no inkar or nasiha, nothing on top. It's just the bottom. And that's not right. And they use many ayats and statements improperly. وَكَذَلِكَ نُوَلِّي بَعْضَ الظَّالِمِينَ بَعْضًا بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Allah says we put wrongdoers in charge of each other because of what they used to do. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean that the leadership is not supposed to be what? Those who lead. And the people do what? Follow them. كما تكون أو كما تكونون يولى عليكم أو يولى عليكم كما تكونون. Is that the leaders you have are a result of what? Who you are. That's partially true. But that doesn't mean that the leadership is not supposed to be what? The policy makers. They set the pace. And the people are supposed to do what? Follow them. And if you look at the history of human beings, subhanAllah, Muslim and non-Muslim, most 9 out of 10 times, major revolution and change, and good or bad, it came from what? And it was only possible when what? When there was what? Change of leadership and administration. And until the country removed this person, until they converted to communism, imperialism, whatever ism it is, they could not do what? Make their aqeedah, their madhab systematic. They couldn't. They couldn't institutionalize it unless they were what? In charge. This is very important for us to understand this now. We're talking about establishing. How can you establish something and you have no power? You have no ability to dominate and to do anything. What do you want to establish? And you can't keep saying, well, we'll get the right leaders when what? When we're righteous. That's not absolutely correct. That's wrong. And oftentimes people, they blame their weakness and their cowardice and their lack of ability to do or stand up, whatever is correct according to the sunnah, off of that principle. And that's not what? That's incorrect. The husband, the father of the house, does he say, well, my children are evil, my children, they want to lead me? Does he say that? What does he do? He leads by what? Example. You want to get the kids to make fajr? He makes salat al-fajr. You want the children to be righteous? He has to be what? Righteous. As that wise non-Muslim said, it says the pack follows the lead dog. The pack follows the what? The lead dog. Not the dogs in the back. They go at the speed, the strength, and the consistency of the dog who's in the front. The husky, the Saint Bernard. Whatever dog is in the front, that's the rest of the dogs. This is what a mechanic told me once in his garage when he was on his knees, scraping and scrubbing and polishing the lights to the car that I was driving at the time being. And he says, you know how long I've been in this garage? You know how long I've been working on cars? Do you know so and so? He says, that's my son, and that's my son, and this generation, passed down. He says, people that come to this garage all the time, and it says, where's the leader, or who's in charge, or where's such and such that I spoke to on the phone, we have this shipment, and so on and so on. It says, that's him over there, scraping this, and scrubbing that, and washing this, and using the power scrubber for this engine and for that engine. And they can't believe it. They say, no. Who's the guy in charge? Not that I work in. It says, that I am. The old man you see on his knees is the old man who owns what? Everything, who has built what? Everything. And he told me his qaida of life. He says, the pack follows the what? The lead dog. So I'm the boss. I have my son to run everything, my grandchildren, but I'm still showing you how to treat a customer. I'm still showing you a reason to come back to my garage. And that's because the people beneath me follow my what? And take my what? My lead. So we've proven in Islam why that is correct. We're also trying to prove why it's what correct intellectually. Everyone understand the point here? So with that being said, what do we need to do as leaders of masjids with regards to the month of Ramadan? And how will the preparation of the imam and of the leader, how will that exude and carry on to the layman? Oftentimes you know what to do when you realize what the people above you are supposed to do. If that's his job, then obviously that's going to be what? Mine or not. So I want to share with you, brothers, inshallah, a pamphlet, something I downloaded from the internet. It's called Al-Isti'dad Al-Da'wi li Shahr Ramadan. Al-Isti'dad Al-Da'wi li Shahr Ramadan. It is about da'wah preparations for Ramadan. Not preparations for the laymen. Not preparations for the small students of knowledge, but preparations for the people that are actually doing what? Da'wah. The Islamic leaders, spiritual leaders, rulers, governments, we're not talking about that. But the imams, the shuyukh, the khutbah, the qurra, the reciters of the Quran, what is their duty with regards to what? Preparing for Ramadan. And how do they get the maximum benefit for this month? Now this is it's like a 10-page book. It's short and it's sweet. And in my opinion, it's very beautiful. And I think that this talk and this approach hasn't been done before. And it's totally and utterly revolutionary. And inshallah ta'ala, it's going to be a benefit because the pack follows the what? The lead dog. If the imam is ready for Ramadan, then inshallah the people are what? Going to be ready for Ramadan. If the imam is taking Ramadan seriously and to get as much benefit as he possibly can, the people are going to what? They're going to try to follow him. And they're going to be shy and embarrassed to be lazy. Just like the dog is shy and embarrassed to be slow and out of breath. And the lead dog is what? Covering ground. It just doesn't work like that. The pack follows the what? The lead dog. That's universal. That's how it goes. So here, the authors or the compilers of this leaflet, of this pamphlet, they've broken down the pamphlet into the following sections. Number one, al-isti'dad al-imani wal-ruhi is the spiritual preparation for Ramadan. How the imam, the leader, the khatib is supposed to spiritually be what? Prepared for this month. Then he says, ثانيا, al-isti'dad al-ilmi wal-ma'rifi is the scientific preparation for Ramadan. The actual knowledge that you need to get. The actual knowledge that you need to review and revise. The sharpening of your blade. If you're a khatib, if you're an imam, if you're a qari for the month of what? Ramadan. Not the spiritual stuff, but the what? The technical stuff now. ثالثا, number three, tahiyatul nas. He says here is preparing the people and congratulating them and greeting them with regards to Ramadan. رابعا, al-isti'dad al-midani is preparation of administration or administrative preparation. Administrative what? Preparation. So first and foremost, he says here, or they say here, الاستعداد الإيماني والروحي إن دور الداعية يتمثل أول ما يتمثل في الارتقاء الإيماني والروحي والتعبد بالأفراد ولن يتأتى له ذلك حتى يكون متحققا هو بهذا الارتقاء ذلك أن فاقد الشيء لا يعطيه فإذا كان الداعية يريد زيادة الرصيد الإيماني لدى الناس فعليه أن يزيد رصيده هو أولا سواء كان ذلك في رمضان أم في غيره. He says that the da'iyah, the caller to Allah, the imam, the sheikh, the scholar, the reciter, the very first responsibility, the very first thing in which his responsibility and duty is manifested in is a spiritual preparation of people. It's to increase people's faith. It's to get people to be better Muslims, for them to have better hearts, better souls. That's the greatest job of the Imam of the Masjid. Everyone understand this? It's to advise the people, to guide the people, to purify the people, to do what? To be what? To be better. How can he do it if he himself hasn't done it what? For himself. And this is one of the most famous, iconic statements of the Arabs. And I would say, فَقْدُ الشَّيْء لَا يُعْطِيهِ. He said, a bum can't lend $1 million. Person who has no money, he can't what? He can't give you anything. So how can I tell you to fear Allah, have khashya of Allah, be mindful of Allah, and I have none of that in my own heart, in my own spirit? So this is the first step of preparing for Ramadan for the Imam, and that is the spiritual what? Preparation. To get his soul, his ruh, his iman, his qalb what? He says irtiqa, elevated. It's time to turn the knobs now. It's time to hit the gas. It's time to go on all cylinders with regards to your spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how can you expect that from the people if you are not doing it yourself? فإذا كان الأمر متعلقا بفرصة تأتي مرة واحدة في العام فإن الأمر يكون أولى وأوجب مع الوضع في الاعتبار أن النفس تكون بحاجة للتهيئة والتمهيد المتدرج حتى تصل للدرجة المرتفعة المستقرة من الإيمان والعبادة. فهذه الحالة لا تتأتى إلا بمجاهدة وضربة للنفس قوية. ولذلك قال أحد الصالحين جاهدت نفسي في قيام الليل عاما فذقت حلاوته 20 عاما. He says here, number one, if this is only once a year, Ramadan is annual. It doesn't come twice a year, it only comes what? Once a year. He says then it's even more serious. You don't get a second chance. If you mess up, if you fumble, drop the ball, you can't come back and win the game. So it's only once a year that Ramadan comes. So you have to pay a great deal of attention to preparing the people's souls and to gradually getting them in gear and getting them to be spiritually fit for this month. But how can that be done if he himself what? Isn't doing it? And then he quotes here one of the earlier ulama and righteous Muslims. He says, "Jahadtu nafsi ala qiyam al-layl sanatan." He says it took me an entire year for me to fight myself to pray at night. An entire year for me to make qiyam al-layl. فَذُقْتُ حَلَاوَتَهُ 20 سَنَةً. He says, and I tasted the sweetness of it for 20 years afterwards. It took a year to fight myself and 20 years of benefiting from that victory. Just think about that now. So you take a week to prepare the people for Ramadan, and inshallah ta'ala, you get the fruits of that for what? 30 days. Tight. We don't have time to mention more than that with regards to that. He mentions here about reading the books of the virtues of Ramadan, about the virtues of Qiyam al-Layl. He says, وَلَوْ بِرَكْعَتَيْنِ, even if it's 2 rak'ah a night. So when Ramadan comes, he's what? It's not like he's starting from scratch to make the Qiyam al-Layl. To practice before the actual game. Then he talks about finishing the Quran, reflecting on it, fasting Mondays and Thursdays, fasting whatever days he can of Sha'ban, and giving sadaqah for him to be an example for what? Others. So the Imam before Ramadan, he should give an iftar on Monday and Thursday. The Imam before Ramadan, he should make a fundraiser, go in his wallet, put down the money first. Put down the money in front of everyone, intentionally. Not to please the people, not to spend for them, but to leave by what? Example. I'm the first person that's going to give fi sabilillah. Bang. So if the Imam puts down 100 pounds or 500 pounds, that's going to have an effect upon what? The other brothers. Well, I know that the Imam doesn't make that much money. In most cases, the Imam is poor. He gets donations, but he just spent 100 pounds. He dropped a big face. Huh? Let me do what? Let me double that. I can't have Mufti spending more money than me. Right? I'm saying, how bad does that look? He's making nowhere near the money that I'm making, and he just dropped $100. It's embarrassing. So what? I'm going to double that. And then another brother was born and says, what? You know what? Bang. And then after that, there's a heap of money. And that's qudwa. It's leading by example. Leading by example. Number 2 is scientific preparation. He talks about reading about the fiqh of Ramadan and making a map of the goals, a chart of the objectives of Ramadan. What do we want to study this month? What do we want to go over this month? What do we want to cover this month? What books that I'm going to read this month? So that's the Imam, and obviously this also would apply to what? To you. And if you're not an imam of a masjid, but the imam of your household, the same rules what? Also apply. Moving forward, then he starts talking about preparing for the khutbahs, preparing for the lessons, preparing for the reminders, etc. And then he talks about welcoming the people, okay, before Ramadan comes in, to congratulate them for Ramadan and preparing them therefore, doing the acts of ibadah in Sha'ban, etc. Last but not least, he talks about the administrative preparation, and that is, he says, وأقصد به التأكد من بعض الأمور الإدارية والتجهيزية وذلك على النحو التالي: التأكيد على جاهزية المسجد وأماكن القيام التي تستوعب الناس. ثانيا، تجهيز أماكن الاعتكاف خاصة في العشر الأواخر. ثالثا، تجهيز أماكن الإفطار للفقراء وغيرهم في المسجد. رابعا، الترتيب الجيد والتام لهذه الأمور مثل الأمور المالية والإدارية وغيرها، بحيث يدخل في رمضان وهو غير مشغول بمثل هذه الأمور التي تعطله عن العبادة والطاعة. He says 4 things is meant by administrative preparation. Number 1 is making sure that the masjid is prepared for the people. The carpet, the walls, the air conditioner, the heaters, the parking lots, the wudu stations, the bathrooms, the sisters, it has to be ready. Not in Ramadan, not during Ramadan. Not a week until Ramadan, but before Ramadan. The masjid has to be shampooed, has to be ready for the swarms and the load of what? The loads of people that want to come into the masjid. Number 2, he says the places for your itikaf have to be ready. If you have tents, if you have in what? In stock already, ready to go. Number 3, he says the places of iftar. Do people eat iftar on the carpet, or do they go to the community hall? Do they go to the lunchroom? Do they have a cafeteria in the masjid? Everything should be stocked up. There should be a mountain of spring waters. Mountains of cases of spring water. The dates, the foods should be done ahead of time. Then he says, at-tartib wal-jayyid wal-tam. He says it's perfecting all of this. All of the money, the preparation, everything should be out of the way. So when Ramadan comes, it's nothing but ibadah to do. Obey Allah, you don't have to worry about ordering this and paying for this, who's cooking this food, who's bringing this food, who's doing this. Look how beautiful this is. So if that's the concept of the imam and the administration of the masjid, then the same applies to your household. Stock up on all of the food before Ramadan comes. This night I'm going to watch the kids, my wife is going to make it itikaf. This night I'm going to do this. This night I'm hosting iftar. This day I have some work. I'm making extra days at work. I'm doing overtime, so I have 3 extra days in Ramadan to sit in the masjid all day long. Wow, look at the fiqh here. So the concept of getting ready for Ramadan, for the purpose of maximizing it, having a successful Ramadan, and inshallah ta'ala, an aqim, the best Ramadan that you can possibly what? That you can possibly have. So bid'nai ta'ala, I think that the message is clear, it's simple, and it's plain. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sincerity in all that we say and all that we do. And we ask Him to allow our Ramadan to be successful and to be effective and to be a tremendous affair. Wallahu a'lam.